to note that if you hover over the little square of yourself, there you will see a little ellipsis, a little blue 3-dot ellipsis at the upper right corner of the square of you. If you can click on that and go to rename yourself, one of the fun things we like to do is to have people put in their location after their name so that we can all get a sense of where one another is. And I'm going to, hang on a second, share my screen briefly. Can you all see, wait, did I do it?
Yep.
Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so welcome to today's very first ever deep dive session into social system mapping. And just to tell you a little bit about where we are at the moment. Last year we did a number of on-ramps. We did them and that was a real intro level session. And this year, given the feedback that we got, we are still doing on-ramps. We're doing on-ramps once a month on the second Monday, which is again an intro level. And then the third Monday, we do these deeper dive conversations, which the deep dive conversation assumes that you are somewhat familiar with social system mapping. You've seen a couple maps, you know what they are, and you're a little bit past the introductory level. If that's not true for you, that's not a problem. You're still, of course, very welcome. Sarah is going to copy and paste some links to 3 public online social system maps that right now they're in the chat. So if what you really want is to just look at some social system maps, go ahead and click on those links and poke around in there. We're not going to be looking at maps today. We're going to be talking about getting started. So that's a different stage. And then the 4th Monday of every month, we'll do Tech Talk, which is a deeper conversation about setting up the technology. Are we all good? Okay. I'm just like seeing people moving around and feeling like I'm talking over their problems. So I want to just make sure that we're all okay. Okay, so that's the new structure, just to let you know where we are in that process. So for today's agenda, we're going to do greetings and an agenda review, which is kind of what I'm at right now. Oh, I want to say, well, I'll come back to that. Then we'll do introductions. For introductions, we're going to break you into small groups of 3, and each person will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to the other 2. So we'll have a total of about 6 minutes. I'll give you some questions to help you get started with that. After introductions, we'll come back together and I will give just a brief overview about getting started using sumApp and Kumu to make social system maps. Once I've given a brief overview, just to sort of orient you into sort of the paradigm that when we talk about social system mapping, the basic context of what we're talking about, because it's a little different from social network analysis mapping. And then once we're done with that, what we're hoping is that there's one of you in this group who is actually on the, on the cusp or thinking about getting started with a new project that you don't entirely know how to get started from. So we're hoping that one of you or a couple of you have a very specific example of a real network and a real project that you would like some feedback on. If you fit that description, I'd ask you to go ahead and put your name and the network that you're thinking about mapping into the chat. So hopefully we have at least one of those. Once I'm done with the overview, we'll pick one of those examples. We'll have you share it with us. We'll have some conversations. There's some of you are brand new to social system mapping, and some of you are fairly experienced with social system mapping. So we'll have a sort of a fishbowl conversation. We'll hear your situation, we'll give input, and then whoever else has questions that haven't been answered will sort of step out and respond to more questions. Then we'll do a brief wrap up and we'll close the session. But if you want to stick around for up to another half hour, you don't have to stay the whole half hour. You can stay 3 minutes and get one question answered and then leave. But if you want to stay for an extra half an hour, I'll stick around. I'm guessing a couple other people will stick around that so you can ask some more questions, or we can just have a broader conversation. We'll just open up. That'll be very informal. It's totally optional. So once we get to the closing, if you just wait for everybody to close down and stay, then we'll start that after everybody's gone. Okay. So let me see. Oh yeah. Give me a second. I get a little lost in my orienting of myself. Oh yeah. A couple other things I just wanted to say about this session, which is I gave you some, or Sarah gave you some links to maps. Also, there are some other resources that Sarah's going to plunk into. No, she already plunked them into the chat box. So once we've had today's session, if you still have more questions, which seems likely, go to the knowledge base online. There's as much stuff as we've collectively generated so far to help you out. And then the last thing is, we're starting today. The topic for today is getting started. Getting started is a common topic when the people ask for an on-ramps, they want more information, and it's a bigger conversation than the few minutes in the intro on-ramps. So that seemed like the normal, an obvious place to start was getting started, because we're getting started with these things. But we want these to be for you and for the community, and we want to co-create them with you. So Sarah is putting in a link into the chat, or she just did, which has a page in the knowledge base where I'm asking if you have suggestions for other topics that you would like to have a deeper dive conversation about, put them in that page, and then we will take that, we will work the calendar out based on those. Okay.
Hey, Christine, can I interject for 1 second? Can I just maybe ask, if you are not speaking, maybe just put yourself on mute, just so we make sure we minimize any background noise for folks. And if you do have a question, feel free to take yourself off of mute to jump in, or use the chat.
Great, thanks. Okay, and just lastly, I am your host today. I'm Christine Capra. I'm the co-founder of Greater Than the Sum, which is a social system mapping consulting firm, and sumApp, which is the tool we use for social system mapping. I'm the co-founder along with my partner and spouse, Tim Hansen, who is now waving at you. And Sarah Shanahan, who just was speaking, is the, we were practicing parade waving earlier. Sarah is the community manager for the Reamp network, and will be doing our technology facilitation today, which means basically plunking links into the chat and putting you into breakout rooms for introductions. So to reiterate, we're gonna break up into intro pods in just a minute. And you will get a pop-up that asks you, it will say, Sarah's assigning you to room 5 or 2 or 1, and you'll need to give permission to go there. It will put you in a room. And then let's, Sarah, will you? No, I'll do it, because I'm putting some questions to help you get started in the chat. So name, where you are, what's the most intriguing or curious thing to you about social system mapping? And then the one thing that you most want to get out of today's session. Starting points, obviously go where you want to. You'll have 2 minutes per person, so we'll break you into groups of 3, roughly. Some may be smaller. There'll be 2 minutes per person. Sarah will give you a message saying when 2 minutes is up to switch, so focus on one person, then another person, and then the third person. And if you can't stand the room you're in because you've been abandoned or for whatever reason, you can just back out of that room and you'll end up in the main room, and we'll figure out how to help you. Okay, is everybody ready? Sarah, you can go for it. Thanks. Well, welcome back. And okay, no one can see my screen, correct? I'm not sharing, that's correct.
We can just see your beautiful face.
Thank you. Okay, so the overview of getting started doing social system mapping with sumApp and Kumu. Back in the day, Tim and I did various kinds of data gathering, analysis, and visualization, and we did some network maps in Kumu. One of the things I didn't like about network mapping or social network analysis was that I thought that a whole network should be able to access the maps online and see more information about the nodes on the maps, and the old tools were just, you know, little squares and lines, and you put them up on a screen in a PowerPoint presentation once a year and say, here's your influencers, and that would be pretty much it. And that just didn't appeal to me. So we did some maps putting data from other tools, other social network analysis data gathering tools into Kumu. And I just thought they were horrible. So one of the, when we ended up building sumApp, and one of the things we were doing when building sumApp was trying to solve all these problems of things that I didn't like from the other tools. One of which was that no matter what you did, no matter how perfectly you did it all, the data still came out and it needed to be cleaned up and it needed to be rearranged. And like sometimes, you know, the same person would take the survey 3 times and different people would be connected to the 3 different versions of that person. And it would just be this horrible thing. And so you'd have to sort of like plan everything ahead of time. So the paradigm was that first you have to get your survey perfect because you've only got one shot at this. Secondly, so you can't be changing things midstream because that's just not how it works. Secondly, you have to push everybody to take this survey when, you know, 90% of your population has no idea what this is about and they could care less. And so it's this big like, push, push, push. And then you got to close the survey like a week or 2, depending on how experienced and sophisticated your analyst is and your data wrangling is, because you close it because the data is not clean. It's got to get rearranged and cleaned up and reorganized and fixed, and all this stuff has to happen. And then you can put it in your visualization tool, and then you have to do this analysis. So let's say you're doing a map for an annual event. You've got to close down the survey 2 weeks beforehand so that you can actually have the map prepared for the annual event. And that just, there were a lot of reasons that whole paradigm, I really didn't like it. I wanted people to be able to see what they were getting into before they got into it. So it's like, here's a map, there's some people, this is why we're asking you this information. This is what we're going to do with it. We're going to visualize your relationships, etc., so that they can say, okay, yep, I get it now. Now it makes sense to me. I'm willing to be on that map. Also, I didn't like that, you know, you close it at say 2 weeks ahead of time and anybody who didn't do it can't be on that map. It's just like they don't exist. So that was, I wanted people to be able to show up at an event and say, oh, now I get it. Yeah, I want to be on that map. And to be able to just, for us to say, here's a link, go ahead, do it, and you'll be on the map by, you know, within an hour. So, so we designed sumApp to be iterative, to be able to continually add new people, to be able to, like, let's say you're halfway through your project and you say, oh my God, we really didn't think of this, because until we could see it and have conversations around it, wouldn't have dawned on anybody. But now that we can see it, we realize, you know, we should have asked, you know, what kind of pets they have, or whatever the question is. We learn as we go. We can't figure everything, especially with a new kind of tool. We don't always know ahead of time what it is we need to ask. And I wanted us to be able to, in the middle of a project, say, oh, we need to add a question, to be able to just add the question and then say to people, okay, we added a question, you know, please go back in and answer that one question. They don't have to do everything all over again. But so it felt like the way we've been doing social network analysis is that A, it's a top-down thing. B, you have to get everything figured out 10 or 20 steps ahead of time. You have to push everybody to participate, you know, and so you have to foresee where they're going to have a problem 10 or 20 steps ahead of time. And then you need experts to analyze it and tell this relatively passively mapped network what's what about themselves. And so we designed sumApp that you can just keep adding new people, that the data just keeps updating into Kumu, that you don't need to do data cleanup. You can do data cleanup if it, to the degree it's necessary, in the sumApp tool, as opposed to export it, fiddle with it manually, and then put it into Kumu. And that you can keep changing the actual, adding things to the survey, or changing the wording of a survey. So that's what we created. And in creating that, discovered that we had sort of created not only a nicer tool, but a whole different potential paradigm for how for how network mapping could be used. And over time, as I started to see that people who were familiar with social network analysis kept wanting to do it the way they were used to doing it, they kept wanting to have everything figured out ahead of time, and they kept sort of hesitating to jump in until they got all their T's crossed and their I's dotted, you know, for a year out. I realized that both the process as well as the content of what we had, the tools we had created, the process and the content that you could create with these new tools was different enough from a social network analysis paradigm that it needed a new name. And so eventually Sarah and I together, sort of, and Tim, renamed it social system mapping, so that we could just differentiate it. And so from the very start, what we're saying is that whole huge leap of faith, and that whole huge having to have everything figured out and having to be, you know, an expert and address all the possible things that could emerge ahead of time, that can just go away. There are times when you still might need to do it that way. It still might need to be a top-down sort of one-off experience. There are definitely, we have clients where that's how it's done. And we don't say, no, we are not going to do it that way, because there are reasons they do. But in an ideal social system mapping universe, what you would do is you would have a project in mind. You would just get a sumApp trial and start fiddling with sumApp so that you can understand what you can do using sumApp. You would add a few people into a map. So let's say I'm starting a new project. I might throw, you know, Jim and David and Sarah and me and Tim and Katie and Phil into, you know, I just might put us into the list and say to all of them, just send them all an invite and say, hey, I'm starting a new map. Here's the point of it. Would you just take a look and give me some feedback? It might be that, you know, my first 5 people have no idea what this is, in which case I would set it up, put some test questions in there, send it out, and then I would put the data into a Kumu map so that they can see the outcome of what this data is doing. They can see the visualization. You can then put an embed link from the Kumu map into sumApp so that when they're in sumApp, they can see the map. And then I would just talk with them about what is this, how, you know, how might we use this? What value could there be? What kinds of questions might we ask? So I would use the learning process, the pilot process, as a tool for engaging a small handful of people that I know, that I think would be interested for whatever reasons. They're kind of data geeks, or they like visualizations, or they're just super into networks. Pick a handful of people, do that with, I usually call those like the advocates. Do that with that, do a first round with advocates, get their feedback, tweak sumApp, tweak the map, start to figure out, learn how to, so through all this, you're learning how sumApp works. You start to learn how to do things in Kumu, and you're starting to engage a group of people who have an investment, or have some kind of sense of ownership, or at least hopefully enthusiasm for mapping. And from there, it just kind of ripple that out, so that then you ask those people, so like the 8 that I just mentioned, or however many, I might say, okay, now within this particular space of this network, you know, will you help me, you know, will you share this with other people? Will you get them to take it? Will you, you know, will you advocate for it? And ripple it out that way. So number 1 is, I just say jump in, just jump in and splash around and make a little bit of a mess and get confused and get unconfused. Because there's so much, if you really use this as an interactive tool, as a learning tool with a group of people, it's just like any kind of co-creation. There's no way you're going to know everything ahead of time. There's no way a small group of 3 people is going to know everything ahead of time. And so to make it an iterative, reflective process, that's part of what we're trying to help our networks learn how to do is to be iterative and to be co-creating and reflecting. And so that's kind of the overall, the general process that I advocate for. And the other piece that I would strongly suggest is we sort of have a little way of talking about the different roles in a social system map. So for instance, in Sarah's universe, Sarah is her map's visionary. She's the one who from the very beginning had a strong sense of what was possible with the map and what value it would bring to the network. And so she was like the first advocate. Sarah, people who are usually the visionaries or the first advocates are the people who are in networks and have the influence within a network to actually get a map project rolling. Those people generally, I will say in my experience, aren't super techie. So those people can be, are great at selling the idea, and they're great at promoting the map, but then they get stuck in sumApp. sumApp is pretty simple, but usually where they get really stuck is in Kumu, and it can get frustrating. So you kind of need to find somebody in your network who has enough technical comfort and enough sort of curiosity with things like data and visualization that they are interested in learning how to like set up the maps in Kumu and just how to sort of deal with the moving around of data. So, and then, so we talk about 3 roles. There's the visionary role I just mentioned. There's the mapper or technical role that I just mentioned. And then there's a 3rd role. And ultimately this role is the role that is most crucial for keeping a map ongoing. And that is what we call the sense maker. And the sense maker role is a person or persons who are able to help the network use the map to start to think systemically and to start to think in a more networked way and to learn how to use the map for self-organizing, for strategizing, for decision making. And so that person is like the person who really embeds the map into the activities of the network, into the ongoing activities of the network. So the reason I say that now is when you're getting started with a project, a good thing to do is to ask yourself, which of these roles fit for me? Maybe the sense maker and the visionary role are often more people roles, and the tech role is less of a person role. And sometimes there's a person who's a great visionary, they can kind of sense and they have an intuition about the value, but they don't really have an idea of how to facilitate groups to do learning with it. So ask yourself what's your strongest role or 2, and then I would suggest finding someone to play the other roles. And so that's your sort of your core team, and then together your core team builds out from there in an ideal project. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to, what I want to do now is take a breath, since I talked a lot. And I see that we've got, so it looks like Katie had a project she was thinking about, and Lisa had 2 projects she was thinking about. And what I want to do is I want to start with Lisa, simply because, Katie, I know you have some experience. I consider you one of the moving into the elder category. And so let's start with Lisa and so we'll sort of do, we'll put Lisa's project at the center. I want to ask you some questions. Lisa, are you there?
I am, yeah.
Okay. I'm not, on my thing. How come I'm not seeing you? Oh, there you are. Sorry, you're right there. Just a lot of things in front of my face. So what we'll do is we'll ask, we'll hear about one of the projects. So I want to sort of like have a whole coherent project in mind. So you can tell us about one of them. Then we'll have a discussion with those of us who have experience. We'll sort of help you think about it, give you some feedback about the project. And then hopefully that discussion will help inform your other project, and it will help inform Katie's project. And when at some point, we'll sort of stop with that, and then we'll see if Katie has some questions that still didn't get answered, and we'll sort of go to Katie. yes, okay. So, is that good?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
So which one, and tell us about the project.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to figure out what I really need help with. As I was saying in the small group, I'm way more theoretically have my head wrapped around these things than have actual experience with it. So anything I learn from all of you will be very helpful. We've actually made some inroads to starting on the staple foods network. So I guess maybe I will talk about the potential project with the Prescott College faculty. And that's something that will actually fall to me more to try to sort of figure out and to form a team and to do the things you were talking about. So what's happening there is that I teach online graduate programs at Prescott College, and Prescott has had some growth in the last few years where they have acquired faculty from other colleges, programs from other colleges, you know, and other initiatives and so forth. So they have this very diverse faculty in a paradigm that's supposed to be maximizing interdisciplinary work, but the faculty don't really know each other very well, and they don't know what their skill sets are, what their interests are, and all of that. So so on the one hand, that is a project, a networking project that could be very valuable for the college itself, for collaborations within departments and that sort of thing. But there's also another player that's interested in using or I shouldn't say using, but collaborating with the faculty on projects where the faculty can bring expertise to community-based projects. So they really need to know that information as well. So it's sort of a two-pronged situation. So it's sort of on the table right now. The other entity that's interested, that their interest is sort of, yeah, well, when you do this networking piece and you figure out what's going on, then we can talk more. So it's really on me at this point, maybe, to sort of figure out how to initiate this with the faculty at Prescott. So that's where I'm at. And I was taking fast and furious notes about how to sort of get started, but I'd be interested in hearing from folks on other ideas.
So can I just ask a couple clarifying questions?
Sure.
So one is, it sounds to me like you've got two purposes for this map. One purpose is to help with self-organizing and seeing the whole of the network for the members of the network, for the faculty themselves.
That's right, yeah.
So that's one purpose. And another purpose is semi of like a promoting and a sharing of the resource of that network to an external audience of other potential people who would be wanting to access the expertise and the skills of that network.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
Okay. So it's both an internal facing and an external facing sort of.
Right.
How many faculty?
You know, I was going to look that up. I don't know, but you know, I don't know.
10, 80, 500?
100, maybe. Okay. Yeah.
Anybody else have any clarifying questions that they want to ask? Here's a question. Are these faculty all in, are they geographically distributed? Or are they in a? They
are. There's a core group that are located on campus, but there's a very strong online faculty presence as well. So those folks are everywhere from Alaska to Hawaii to the East Coast, and you know, and international as well. So,
okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Is an important aspect of what you're doing to look at the connections among the faculty and how they're collaborating with each other?
I think it is important to, I mean, I think that's a goal. I think right now collaboration is not as strong as it could be because people don't really know what folks are doing,
mm-hmm.
you know, what their interests are, what they would like to collaborate on, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other clarifying questions?
Yeah, when you've got an internal audience, an external audience, how do you figure out how far the internal audience is prepared to share with the external audience the nature of connections, which show relationships.
So I didn't quite hear the first part of it, but how do you figure out what's fair, did you say? Or
no, if you've got like a private map, but
yeah.
then you're inviting external people onto the private map, then it's maybe a different dynamic, that people may be prepared to share information privately about their relationships within faculty, but then you say, hey guys, we're going to share all this with somebody else. Does that how does that affect maybe the initial proposition of the process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I don't know whether that's just a matter of like sense making of the map, the first map, the internal map, and then relating what you're, what you feel is the map is demonstrating to that external audience, or whether you create a second map that would, interface with the two. I don't know, but that's a great question.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Would you say the focus at this point is more transactional around getting people to know each other within the network and perhaps collaborate around affinities, as opposed to building particular kinds of relationships, deepening relationships, interpersonal relationships, and so forth?
Yeah, I think it's interactional, but I think that looming is this other opportunity to work with this other agency, which is could be very important to faculty as well, and to the college and how it's perceived. So, but I think, to start with, it's interactional. It's like, just who's out there? What are you working on? What are you interested in? What do you feel like working on? Who needs what? Who wants what? Yeah.
Is the external audience merely an audience, or would they also be mapped? So David, your question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. So it's a large organization that's an umbrella organization for community groups working on wellness and equity and that sort of thing. So they're sort of facilitating projects and dialogue in these various communities. And I think from what I know, once these communities have arrived on projects or initiatives that they want to do, then their interest would be into tapping into Prescott College faculty to help guide these community groups toward the completion of a project. So that's the relationship.
So what aspects of the project, of getting started, like where are you most feeling like is unclear to you, or confusing, or scary, or
yeah, well, I think that if I'm anything, I'm a sense maker and a visionary. I'm definitely not the tech person. So finding that possibly second or third person to be part of a team. I'm concerned about really just representing and articulating the value of all this well enough so that people will want to participate. Those basic things, you don't want to you want people to participate. So if you're not able to convince people the value of it, that's the fear of failure there.
Did the model that Christine laid out earlier of iteratively building out, but starting with a few people that have got it, or that you think might get it, does that seem attractive to you?
It does. That really hit the nail on the head for me, because I'm really sure I can convince my program, the faculty in my program, to do that first. So that absolutely was helpful right off the mark. I just thought, well, for sure, I can get these folks, they'll buy in, they'll participate, and then sort of selling it as this sort of thing that we're all learning from, as a process, and getting them to sort of work and advocate with the rest of the faculty. That all made perfect sense. So that was super great. Yeah.
So there's a handful of others in this call who have done this selling of it to people. I'm wondering if you guys have other thoughts, stuff that from your experience.
I mean, I can say that the kind of challenges that Drew and I are facing in London, where we're working with 4 equality networks, where the aim is to help those networks communicate within themselves, then across the networks, they're very excited about the potential of this, and doing a lot of surveys, needs analysis of their members about what do you want to do. So the members are saying, wow, you know, we want to find out where we can get resources, we want to have more conversations, we want to connect with people, we want to collaborate, and so on. And I think the dilemma I'm seeing anyway is that a map will do some of that, but not all of that. A lot of that actually depends on other communication methods. And when people are not necessarily very tech savvy and they're all using different communication methods and so forth, there's a kind of danger that people get excited about the map and then actually find the map is not what does it. What does it is the system of map plus communication methods plus the different roles that Christine has been describing. So do you go through a process where you get people mapping on the map and so on and so forth, or do you also try and play it a bit back from what's it actually going to be like when we've got the map? What sort of things what sort of methods are we actually going to have, so you don't raise too much expectation of what the map can do.
Right, that's great, thank you.
Lisa, I have a couple thoughts based on you know, an approach that I used last year on a project like this, which was, you know, I'm wondering if you can build more excitement among the faculty by engaging in more of a participatory way. So what would it be like to go to the faculty and say, what do you want to know about each other? You know, I'm thinking of doing this map. How could it serve you? In addition to, you know, here's some of the outcomes I'd like to see or that I think would be valuable. And then it sounds like if there's a core group of people who are really excited about it, what if you pulled them together as a like beta testing group in a sense, or, you know, worked with them to kind of create the survey or figure out what the profile looks like for each of the people on the map. And then they could be your early adopters, you know, do it, look at it together. And then when that goes out to the wider faculty, there will be something on the map to look at.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
More interest.
Thanks.
You know, one of the questions that we've asked folks on our team, so mostly staff, thinking about our staff here, that I think has been useful is we've asked them the question about, like, what are some of the things that they're paying attention to in the network already? And using that as a springboard then to, like, figure out what are the things that they're really looking for, what are some of the assumptions that we're holding, and how might we use the map then to test those assumptions or to surface some of those stories that we believe to be true or that we believe that are happening in the network because of what we're doing. So that has led to some really, I think, interesting conversations and interesting ways of using the data in a different way.
Perfect. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Hey, Christine, when we get a chance, we did have a question come in. It's not really related to Lisa's situation of interest necessarily, but I do want to make sure that we have time to get to it. So whenever that's appropriate, let's make sure we circle to it.
Yeah, we will. I just wanted to piggyback on what Sarah just said about asking what people are paying attention to anyway. I'm starting to find that, well, I found a long time ago that if you say, what should we map? People's heads are sort of in this box of what they're used to mapping or what feels to them like appropriate research questions. So we stopped starting at what should we map, and we backed it up to what are you paying attention to? Because because that opens up the mind further, and then people start to think about what really matters, which for people who aren't researchy types, they don't think about what should we map, and they don't really care about what should we map. And so they're just doing this very superficial, like, I don't know, this dimension or that dimension. But so in just the question itself helps stir the thinking about what really matters to us and how can we then, so once we've got that in our hands, you know, what really matters, then how can we
that's great
to get at that. So we're part of the whole process all along is just really trying to figure out how to get the imagination engaged and how to ask the right questions. So let's segue to, I'll answer Patty's question, which I did notice in the chat, Sarah. Thanks for bringing it up though, and thanks for being reassuring that we get to it. And And then let's see if Katie has questions or parts of her situation that are different that she'd like feedback on. So Patty's question is, what if the budget is so small that one person has to serve all 3 roles? I would say you can still do that. Katie did that, and Jim does that, and I have Tim to help me get really sophisticated with the tech parts. But if I didn't have Tim, I would do that. So you can do it. I would just suggest while you're doing it, looking to see if there's anyone who's like geeky enough that they would do it just for the fun of learning it, or that they would help you learn just for the fun of learning it. That's number 1. And number 2 is, don't put too much pressure on yourself for perfection, and just like be willing to go with your learning process, especially around the tech stuff. And there was a third I was just going to say. Okay, lost it. Which is keep coming back to these sessions and being part of these conversations, because you will learn. And then the tech talk sessions will help you learn the technology. And you can always ask us questions about Kumu, how to use sumApp data in Kumu in our Slack channel. So
I was thinking also, though, just try to find some allies that have some passion about it within your group, and you don't pay them, but they're thought partners for you.
Yeah.
Especially around the sense making and the visionary piece.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Katie, parts of your situation that didn't get addressed.
Sure. Well, maybe just a couple quick, more technical questions about it. So I'm working on a project with a local neighborhood, which is creating a community wildfire protection plan. I live in Northern California, and it's very vulnerable to wildfire, as you may have heard in the news recently. And so I'm really interested in the idea of using sumApp and Kumu in service of this community work to build resilience. And so there's one of the objectives is to get the community more involved in local action to mitigate the risk. And so there's, I'm wondering about using it to help community organizing, but also to kind of do some asset mapping of what the community, what community resources are, right? Like who's good with a chainsaw and willing to use that locally, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking about that, but it's just community members as opposed to, people with professional time and space to engage the map. So I don't imagine that the map would necessarily, there may be people in the community who are interested in delving into it. But I think it's more, the purpose would be for the Fire Safe Council to have that data to work with, but also to help organize groups. There are these COPE groups, right, which are these kind of micro community groups within that. So first of all, I guess a technical question is, there's no reason why you can't overlay a map using this sumApp plugin onto the geographic template that that Kumu has. Is that right?
You can do that, and people do. The challenge is, for instance, if you're using zip codes and you've got 10 people in the same zip code, they'll all pile on top of each other.
Right. No, this would be street address.
Okay.
So kind of zooming in and then seeing
that should work
on a street who's on the map and where blank spots in the map so that there's good coverage. Okay. Yeah,
that should work.
And then I'm just curious if anyone else in the call has used it in this kind of situation, or resonates with that kind of approach.
Thoughts, anyone?
No. Yeah. Okay. Well, it feels exciting to me, the idea of being able to use it like at a really zoomed in, community scale. And then, yeah, I don't know.
Katie, how do you think how do you picture people, the participants in the map, actually using it?
Well, that's what I was saying. I don't see most of them using it at all. But it's more this local Fire Safe Council who would be using it to, help direct outreach where it's needed and help make sure there's good coverage. And also
so
to be
it's
able
more
to
of an asset map.
It's more of an asset map, but also an organizing map. So to, you know, to ensure that there are these subgroups organized, so these clusters of, you know, on a particular street, that there's a group organized there, and so to be able to see where that's happening and where it's not happening.
So you would use the Fire Safe Council to basically the inquiry there is about how will you as a council use this map?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to see from an asset and a relationship perspective?
Right.
It sounds like a really fabulous, exciting, interesting, cool thing. So I would encourage you to just keep coming back and giving us feedback and or, you know, letting us know your process or your progress, and then get more our thinking some more, because as you proceed, things will come up. But it sounds really like it's clearly it's a cutting edge use that is exciting.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Lisa,
I think just to add,
go ahead.
one thing.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just to add one thing that I'm curious, and maybe you can, I don't know if you can share anything on that now, but or otherwise another time maybe, to see, because you're mapping more of a local community, so people can actually, I guess, quite easily meet each other, or at least parts of the people in the network will have a possibility to meet and connect. And I'm curious about the kind of digital real life interface and opportunities there for using the map, meeting each other, engaging in certain activities or actions. So for me, that's quite interesting and specific also to that mapping project, which is not international.
Nice.
So it's, sorry. So it's 3 minutes to the top of the hour, and I want to see if there's anybody who can't stick around for the extra optional half hour who has a burning question that they just feel they need to ask before they hang up, before they go. And if so, just jump in, because I can't necessarily track all the movements and see if somebody's waving at the same time.
I don't know whether this is a burning question to follow through on, but I thought there's some real value in what Sarah Ann was saying about how do you understand what is happening in a network already, and then think about kind of, you know, how the map fits into that, which is also chimes with me saying, how do you think about the communication methods that you will need and so forth. So it's kind of, how do you make it an iterative process, not just an iterative process of developing the map, but an iterative process of understanding the various ways in which people are interacting, what they're using at the moment, and so on. So it's the overall process of combining the different roles, the technologies, and so forth. Yeah, and maybe easier in a local community setting, because you've got, you know, more ways of interacting. And Jim, at one point when we were talking about this on the community of practice, said, yeah, maybe that's an easier container, if you like, for what we're talking about.
Cool. So on that note, since we've got just about a minute left, just wanted to, for a wrap up, if especially those of you, I know we did not get, everybody did not get a chance to talk. So I'm going to contemplate that, given our structure, for future sessions. We're, like I said, this is a brand new structure, a new session structure. So we're still going to tweak it, and I'm going to think about that. But if there's thoughts or insights, especially those of you who didn't get anything, get to talk at all, thoughts or insights that you're leaving with, or big questions, just I invite you to, one at a time, just sort of popcorn like toss them into the middle, and we'll take them and think about them for next time, or just get them as a reflection back, and then we'll close. So anyone?
I'm just interested if anyone wants to explore how to connect communication tools with the map for people on the map.
Anyone? Okay.
I was just waiting for the people who hadn't spoken yet.
Me too.
I've got a lot of things to say. No, this business about really thinking about who's using the map. I was thinking about Katie's situation where you've got a fire council thinking about the map, but they're not necessarily the people that are most involved in the map. So anyway, something about thinking about who uses the map and what things outside of the map you use to generate conversation. You know, what kinds of gatherings do you have that augment the map, sort of where the sense making takes place and with who. Boy, was that a mess, but there it is.
Okay. So we're at the top of the hour. And so for those of you who have hard stops and need to go, I just want to take a pause and say thank you so much for joining us, and look for future sessions to come back and let us know topics you'd like us to discuss. And we'll pause now and just say thank you and goodbye.